Have you ever wondered what gaming is actually doing to your brain over the long term? Most people see gaming as simply entertainment, a way to relax, switch off for a while. But there's much more happening than you might realise. In this study, participants completed cognitive tests before and after playing a video game, allowing researchers to measure exactly how gameplay influenced mental performance. So to understand what gaming is really doing to the brain, we need to start with what happens the very moment you begin playing. The moment you begin playing a game, your brain becomes active. While this may sound pretty obvious, there's a lot of depth to what active really means. Researchers explain that increase in cognitive and motor processing increases brain activity beyond passive observation. In other words, when you're actively interacting with something instead of simply watching it, the brain has far more work to do. And video games demand that kind of interaction immediately. The first system involved is perception. The brain has to read the environment on the screen. It recognises characters, objects, locations, movement, and changes within the world. Every second, new visual information appears, and the brain has to make sense of it quickly enough to understand what's happening. Once the situation is understood, another process begins. The brain has to choose an action. Games constantly present small decisions. Move forwards, turn backwards, attack, avoid. Follow a path, explore somewhere new. The brain evaluates the situation and selects a response. That decision then has to become a physical movement. Signals travel from the brain to the hands, guiding the small motions required to operate the controller. These signals tell you which buttons to press, how to move the analog sticks, and obviously the character on the screen responds accordingly. So this is the loop that's created. The brain observes what's happening, decides how to respond, and then carries out that decision through physical movement. While this loop is happening, another important system becomes involved. The study explains that gameplay stimulates a region of the brain called the hippocampus. The hippocampus plays a central role in spatial awareness. It helps the brain understand environments and how locations relate to each other. As you explore a game world, this system becomes active. The brain begins organising information about the environment. It tracks where areas are positioned, how routes connect to each other, how to get from A to B, alternative routes and routes to avoid. Scientists observe this activity through something called metabolic activity in the brain. This simply means that the brain is using more energy. When neurons are active, they require energy to send signals between each other. The more active those systems become, the more energy that the brain consumes. During gameplay, that energy use increases. This is important. This is what shows the brain is not idle while you play. This is what tells us that the brain is indeed active. Once researchers understood how active the brain becomes during gameplay, the next question was, does that activity actually improve anything? To answer that, the study introduced a simple experiment. Participants were given a memorization task where they had to remember visual information. Their scores were recorded so that researchers could establish a starting point. After that, the participants played a video game for 15 minutes. When the gameplay ended, they were given another memory test. This allowed the researchers to measure whether the mental engagement created by the game had any immediate effect on cognitive performance. And the results showed a clear change. Participants performed better on the memory test after playing the game than they had before. The statistical probability value reported in the study was 0.048. In scientific research, any value below 0.05 is considered statistically significant. This means that there's less than a 5% chance that the improvement happened randomly. In other words, the increase in memory performance was very likely connected to the gameplay itself. The researchers then looked for an explanation. Why would such a short period of gameplay improve memory performance? The answer lies in how the brain processes information. Psychologists refer to this as deep processing. When information is simply observed, the brain processes it at a shallow level. But when the brain must actively work with information, responding to it, making decisions based on it, that processing becomes deeper. Information processed in this way becomes easier for the brain to store and retrieve later. Games naturally create this kind of engagement. The player is constantly working with information. Situations constantly change, new problems appear, and the brain has to adapt to them in real time. Because of that interaction, the brain is not just seeing the information passively, it's actively working with it. And that type of engagement strengthens how the brain stores and recalls information. Over time, this repeated engagement produces something many players recognise from their own experience. The worlds inside games begin to feel familiar. You remember where places are, you know which paths lead somewhere quickly and which ones don't. Moving through the world becomes easier because your brain's already organised that information for you. Researchers refer to these internal representations as cognitive maps. The brain builds a structured understanding of the environment, allowing the player to navigate it more efficiently each time they return. And this ability is a direct result of the brain actively working with the information while playing. But the implications of this kind of mental engagement go beyond memory alone. And the way it responds to regular stimulation becomes even more important as time passes. To understand why this kind of mental activity even matters, the study also looks at how the brain changes over time. Researchers reference a much larger dataset involving 3,305 people between the ages of 16 and 44. What they found is that the brain's response time begins to decline around the age of 24. This doesn't mean that the brain suddenly stops working properly, it simply means that certain processes begin to slow down gradually as part of normal biological aging. There are physical reasons for this. As we age, some of the nerve fibres that carry signals through the brain begin to change, and some connections between neurons weaken. Because of this, information can take slightly longer to travel through the brain than it did when we were younger. But this decline is a slow and natural process. However, the study makes an important point. How quickly these changes affect us can be influenced by how much the brain is used. The researchers explain that mentally stimulating activities requiring concentration and coordination can help support brain activity. And as we discussed earlier, video games naturally demand exactly those kinds of mental skills. When you regularly challenge the brain, it adapts. Scientists refer to this ability as neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity simply means the brain can reorganise itself based on what you repeatedly ask it to do. When certain tasks are performed again and again, the neural pathways responsible for those tasks become stronger and easier for the brain to use. You can see this happen in everyday life. Think about when you learn to drive a car. The first time you sit behind the wheel, everything feels overwhelming. You're thinking about the pedals, the mirrors, the steering wheel, the gear stick, the traffic around you, everything. It feels like way too many things are happening at once. But after weeks or months of driving, those actions start to feel natural, almost automatic. Your brain has strengthened the pathways involved in those tasks. Gaming works in a similar way. The more time you spend navigating the game world, the easier it becomes to move through it. You start remembering locations without thinking about it. You know where certain paths lead, you recognise significant or even insignificant landmarks. You know how to get from one side of the map to the other without even opening the map screen. Your brain has built and strengthened the pathways needed to understand the environment. The study also explains that these changes can sometimes be seen physically inside the brain. Researchers note that the grey matter of the brain can change in volume and density when it's regularly engaged in demanding cognitive tasks. Grey matter is responsible for processing information. It plays a major role in memory, decision making and awareness. When it's regularly stimulated, it remains active and functional. This is why mentally demanding activities are often associated with maintaining cognitive ability later in life. They keep the brain engaged, they give it something to work on. But just to be clear, the study does not prove that gaming completely prevents cognitive decline. Aging continues regardless. Unfortunately, that's just something we're not going to stop by playing Skyrim. But what the evidence does suggest is that the brain responds positively to regular mental engagement. Activities that challenge memory, coordination, that demand your attention and require you to take action, these help keep those systems active as time moves forwards. And for many of us, gaming happens to be that activity. Time takes its toll on all of us eventually. And I guess it's just nice knowing that gaming, something many of us genuinely love and value, is given something back. It gives us stories and characters that we care about, worlds we enjoy exploring, moments of joy that we experience ourselves or share with other people. And all the while, in the background, this joyful experience is keeping our brains active and our minds engaged. Gaming helps to improve our memory, whilst creating some of the best memories that we're going to hold on to. It's not groundbreaking, life-changing cognitive improvements, but it's something, it's enough. We can confidently say that moderate gaming isn't just fun, it's healthy. Now, as you may or may not know, I'm not the best at goodbyes, so